The mayor wanted silence, but his wife vanished instead. "Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I love hearing them." Wolfe uncovers what power tried to hide. It was a Thursday in late October, which in Wolfe's world means the house was under siege from two fronts: cold air and human contact. Fritz was at war with the radiators again, and I was trying to keep the front room clear of clients until after lunch. The phone had been ringing since 10, which meant business was trying to get in. I was trying just as hard to keep it out. When the bell rang at 11:30, I was still arguing with a real estate lawyer who wanted to hire Wolfe to consult confidentially on a zoning dispute. I hung up on him gently and went to the door, expecting another variation of the same. A man who thought Wolfe could fix the unfixable with logic and Latin. Instead, I got the mayor. He wasn't wearing the sash or the grin, but I'd seen his picture enough to know him. Mayor Albert J. Murrow, the man who smiled for cameras like he'd invented sanitation. He was wrapped in an overcoat that cost more than Wolfe's orchid budget, and he had the look of a man who had spent the morning avoiding headlines. "Goodwin?" he said, scanning past me into the hall. "Is he in?" "Wolfe's in," I said. "That's never the problem. The question is whether he's interested." He gave me a look that said he was used to doors opening when he knocked, not being told they might not. "Tell him Albert Murrow needs to speak with him privately. It's urgent." That last word, urgent, has never had a good batting average with Wolfe, but I took him in anyway. There are some names you don't leave on the stoop. Wolfe was at his desk in the office, immersed in a small mountain of invoices that I'd left there to provoke him into speech. He didn't look up when I entered. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "the mayor's here." He turned a page, glanced up briefly, and said, "Which mayor?" "Of New York City," I said, "not the mayor of Hackensack." That got him. He set the page aside, folded his hands, and gave me the look that meant, "Explain this invasion of my home before I expire of disbelief." I did. Then the mayor himself stepped in, closing the door behind him like he was shutting out the city. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "thank you for seeing me without notice." "I had no choice," Wolfe said dryly. "My assistant is hospitable to notoriety." Murrow didn't sit. He paced, which made the room seem smaller. "My wife is missing," he said abruptly. I admit that got even Wolfe to lift an eyebrow. "Missing? She left the house last night. No note, no message, no sign of a struggle." He hesitated, then added, "She took nothing with her except her handbag." I asked, "And you've told the police?" "Not yet," he said quickly. "And I won't. Not unless I have. 2. You understand? This city runs on rumor. If the press gets hold of this, it'll turn into a carnival." Wolfe leaned back. "Then you seek discretion, not discovery." "I seek both," Murrow said. "My wife, Eleanor, is a private woman. I believe she left voluntarily, but there are circumstances." "Always," Wolfe murmured. The mayor stopped pacing. 3 nights ago, she received a letter. No return address. She wouldn't show it to me. She said it was from someone she'd known before we married. She burned it after reading it. Yesterday she was distant, and last night she vanished. He finally sat down, on the edge of the red leather chair like he expected it to eject him. "Mr. Wolfe," he said quietly, "if she's run away, I'll find her and bring her back. If someone's taken her, if she's being used to hurt me politically, I need to know before the papers do." Wolfe studied him. "You're asking me to intrude in a domestic matter, which I ordinarily avoid. But your phrasing is intriguing. You believe she was induced to leave, perhaps under false pretenses." Murrow hesitated. "Yes. By whom?" "I don't know, but whoever sent that letter—" He broke off, swallowed, then added, "They knew something that frightened her." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the radiator. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. "I dislike politics," he said finally, "and I detest entanglements involving marital infelicity, but I despise coincidence even more." "Mr. Goodwin?" "Yes, sir." "You will, for the moment, assume the role of Samaritan. Visit the mayor's residence. Observe what you can. Inquire discreetly of the household staff. You will return with facts, not conjectures." Murrow let out a breath like he'd been holding it since the Bronx. "You'll take the case then?" Wolfe looked mildly offended. "I take no cases until I have reason to believe there is one. Goodwin will determine if your wife's departure warrants my attention. If it does, you may depend on my efficiency and my fee." Murrow stood. "You'll have both," he said. After he left, I stood there, watching the door close. "So," I said, "we're working pro bono for the mayor?" Wolfe sighed. "Poor. You will observe, not intervene. The man's wife is missing, not murdered. For now, the distinction is critical." "Sure," I said, "but if she's not missing voluntarily, it's going to get critical fast." He shut his eyes. "Then, Archie, we must hope she had the sense to choose her own disappearance." Fritz had a plate of braised endive ready for Wolfe's lunch and a lecture for me about drafts at the door. I took both on the fly and went upstairs for a clean shirt. You don't wander into a mayor's house looking like you escaped from a file room. By the time I came down with my tie behaving, the bell rang again, and I got my first reminder that when a public man visits our private address, the public follows. Two men stood on the stoop with the purposeful look of people who practice keeping their faces from saying anything. One was the chief of staff, Harold Bligh, medium height, careful suit, a voice that probably had a law degree. The other had shoulders that were acquainted with county budgets for overtime. Security detail, jaw like a hinge. Both showed me the reflex to flash badges they weren't carrying and names they didn't intend to repeat. "Mr. Goodwin," Bligh said, polite enough to make the teeth hurt. "The mayor asked us to touch base." "And here we are touching," I said. "Any particular anatomy in mind?" He gave a blink that would have creaked if it had hinges. "The mayor takes discretion seriously. He wants to ensure your employer understands the sensitivities." "Wolfe understands the dictionary definition of sensitivity," I said, holding the door just wide enough to let my voice out and their shoes stay out. "However, he's indisposed. The orchids have his full attention at 9 and again at 4, and between those times he honors his stomach. You can tell me." Bligh didn't love that plan, but he didn't have a better one he could show. "Mrs. Murrow is likely at a friend's," he said. "She's private. We request that any actions you take be coordinated with this office." "Meaning with you?" "With me," he agreed. "And that you confine inquiries to the domestic sphere. This is not political." "Everything you say to me has the word 'not' in front of it," I said. "It tends to make a man suspicious." The security man shifted his weight. "We'll have a car watch the block," he said, like he was telling me the garbage pickup schedule. "Try the curb around the corner," I told him. "Wolfe values unimpeded sight lines. If you crowd ours, you'll get a lecture on civil encroachment that will bruise your ears." Bligh pressed a card into my hand. No email, just a number that would be answered by 3 rings and a secretary. "Mr. Murrow appreciates Mr. Wolfe's help," he said. "Please keep us apprised." "Sure," I said. "I'll send a telegram." I closed the door, set the chain, and stood for a beat to see if any of their shadows leaked through the wood. They didn't, but the house had that faint pressure you get when strangers put their eyes on it. The brownstone knows when it's being evaluated. In the office, Wolfe had applied himself to the endive and a glass of beer, which is the closest he comes to a standing ovation for Fritz. He glanced at me, not asking. I gave him the capsule summary, including the proposed curbside audience. "Imbeciles," he said. A car is a proclamation. If the woman has left voluntarily, visibility is the worst tonic. He dabbed his lips. Your visit to the mayor's residence should be now. While you're out, stop at Rusterman's and tell Felix his sauce last week was unpardonable. Should I bring a writ or just my dimples? I asked. Bring your eyes, he said, and diligence. Observe the household's rhythm. Mrs. Murrow, if she fled, disturbed it. If she was enticed, someone composed the disturbance. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in the smell of endive as if it contained clues. When he opened them, he added, "And Archie, before you leave, inform Fritz that I will require the saffron tonight. In view of the mayor's visit, our kitchen must not be found wanting." That was Wolfe's way of saying the walls had heirs. We don't keep saffron for politics, but he likes to remind the universe that the brownstone runs on his palate, not the city's panic. I gave Fritz the message and collected my hat, but I didn't make it to the front door. The bell rang again, 3 short presses that said, "Not a salesman." This time, the visitor had advance anger. A woman in her 30s, coat unbuttoned, hair arranged to look unarranged, with the expression of someone who'd run 2 lights and a moral. "I need Mr. Wolfe," she said, stepping in like the air outside had offended her. "Now." "Join the line," I told her. "It runs from City Hall to our stoop." She fished in her bag, pulled out a letter, hesitated, and stuffed it back. "My name is Verna Hale. I work with Mrs. Murrow. If the mayor has come, then he's already put men on your block." "Fine. He's made it public by trying to keep it private. But you should know this before you leave." That last bit snagged the fabric. We hadn't told her I was going anywhere. I took her to the office. If Wolfe minds unannounced women, he hides it badly. The eyebrow did mount the ridge again. "Miss Hale," he said after I introduced her, "your arrival suggests urgency. Speak." She remained standing, hands tight around the bag strap. "Mrs. Murrow volunteers at our literacy center in the East 90s. I run the schedules. Yesterday she asked me to swap her slot. She said an appointment had come up. She couldn't move. She never misses." I said no problem. Then last night I got a text from her, late, saying not to tell anyone she'd changed her hours. Not even the mayor's office. She never sends texts like that. She doesn't like leaving trails. Yet she left one, Wolfe said. "Interesting. I thought it was odd," she went on, "until this morning when I stopped by the townhouse to drop off a pamphlet she was formatting. The security gate was in home mode. The night log said the back door opened at 11:53 and closed at 11:56. No alarm. Whoever left knew the code. Bly had said no sign of a struggle. Not asked was whether there was a sign of a plan. "Why come to us?" I asked. "You could have dialed his office. They have men for everything, including inconvenient knowledge." "Because I don't trust them," she said. "And because Mrs. Murrow once told me that if anything felt wrong and I couldn't say why, there was a man on West 35th who disliked being bothered but liked being right." Wolfe's mouth moved a fraction, his version of a smile's ghost. "Flattering," he said, "and inopportune. Miss Hale, what was the appointment she couldn't move?" "I don't know," she said, "but she mentioned a name earlier in the week. Not to me. On the phone. I only caught one word. Savarin." She said it like it tasted bad. Wolfe's eyes slid to mine. Savarin is a dessert and a restaurant and a family name I'd heard in contexts that paid for my cab rides. He said nothing to me because he didn't have to. I already had my hat in my hand. "Archie," he said, "the mayor's residence first. Miss Hale, you will give Mr. Goodwin your number and the hours. Someone will answer it. Do not alarm your colleagues. Do not speak to Mr. Bly. If you are approached, be dull." "Dull is my specialty," she said, which was untrue, but we allow people their little boasts. I walked her to the door. As I opened it, I felt the familiar tickle at the edge of habit, the world peering in. Across the street, a sedan had found religion about parking rules. The man behind the glass wasn't reading the paper. I tipped my hat to him and closed the brownstone behind me. When Wolfe's house breathes differently, you notice. The air had a wrinkle in it, and I was about to see what had pressed. The sedan shadowed me to the end of the block. When I turned left onto Madison, it stayed politely 3 cars back, keeping the kind of distance that says, "Yes, I'm tailing you, but let's not make it awkward." I'd seen that brand of discretion before. Bureaucratic, underfunded, and doomed to fail if the subject was awake. I let it ride for 3 lights, then ducked down a delivery lane, stepped through the side door of a stationery store, and came out the front. When I reached the curb again, the sedan was gone. I took a cab uptown to the Murrow townhouse. The mayor's place on 73rd was the kind of brownstone that made our 35th Street headquarters look like a monk's cell. I showed the butler my most reassuring grin and Wolfe's card, which does for doors what crowbars do for lesser men. He hesitated, a trained reflex. But when I said Wolfe had already spoken with the mayor, he let me in. The house smelled of lemon polish and civic respectability. Everything was clean enough to run for office. The drawing room looked like it hadn't been lived in since the inauguration. You could see yourself in the piano lid, which told me Mrs. Murrow either liked order or had staff that did. I took in the details Wolfe would want. 2 handbags on the rack, one small and expensive, one functional and worn. No coat missing from the hooks, except, judging from the gaps, hers. On a side table was a porcelain dish containing the ashes of something half-burned. A letter, maybe. The butler said, "Mr. Murrow isn't home, sir. He went to City Hall." "That's fine," I said. "I'm here for Mrs. Murrow's room." Mr. Wolfe's instructions. He blinked, deciding between duty and authority. Authority won. "This way," he said, leading me upstairs. The bedroom was immaculate. Too immaculate. I've seen runaways pack in panic, and I've seen women plan exits. This was neither. There was no suitcase open, no drawer rifled, no gaps where jewelry should be. But there was one odd note. A book left face down on the bed, a folded tissue marking a page. I picked it up. It was Savarin's Principles of Taste, a food memoir published in Paris 30 years back. Wolfe would have snorted in approval and then dismissed it as sentimental tripe. I opened to the tissue mark. Chapter 12. The Flavors of Absence. Underlined in faint pencil were 2 words. Truth unseasoned. I don't go around dramatizing pencil marks, but when a missing woman underlines a phrase like that and disappears, it's not about recipes. The dressing table had a single framed photograph. Mrs. Murrow with another woman. Verna Hale, the literacy friend who had appeared uninvited at Wolfe's. Their smiles were the genuine kind, not the social kind you wear when your husband's running for re-election. I thanked the butler, left a polite fiction about reporting back, and headed downstairs. In the hall mirror, I caught a reflection that didn't belong. Someone standing half-hidden near the vestibule, pretending to examine a painting. Young, wiry, the face of a man who believes conversation is for other species. He straightened when I turned. "Admiring the art?" I asked. He grunted. "Maintenance. Security check." "Of course. I should have recognized the uniform," I said. "Invisible." He didn't reply. But when I stepped past him, he muttered something that stopped me. "You shouldn't be here, pal. This place is being watched." "By who?" He gave me a look that said I'd already asked too much, then turned the knob and vanished out the side door. I didn't follow. You don't chase the messenger when you don't know which army he serves. Back on the street, the sedan was back in position. Same driver, same disinterest. I waved cheerfully and hailed another cab, giving the driver an address 2 blocks west. At the first corner, I slipped out and cut east again, walking the last half-mile to the literacy center where Verna worked. The building was a reformed warehouse painted in hope and budget constraints. Inside, it smelled of old paper and good intentions. Verna was gone for the day, but the receptionist said Mrs. Murrow had come by Tuesday, alone, and stayed in the records room for almost an hour. The only thing near the records room worth visiting was the archive cabinet where volunteer files were kept, backgrounds, donors, financials. "Did she take anything?" I asked. The receptionist frowned. "No idea. She said she was reviewing grant files. I wasn't going to question the mayor's wife." I thanked her, left, and walked until I found a payphone. Yes, they still exist if you know where to look, and dialed home. Wolfe picked up after the third ring, which meant I'd interrupted something serious, like digestion. "Well?" he said. "She left without haste," I said. "Nothing packed, no sign of struggle. A burned letter, likely the one she got Monday. And a little literary garnish. A book by Savarin, with a phrase marked. Also, someone at the townhouse didn't want me there. Security, maybe freelance. And our friend Miss Hale's place of work is now a chapter in this tale. Mrs. Murrow spent time there Tuesday in the archives." Silence from Wolfe's end, the kind that means he's stirring mental sauce. Then, "Describe the phrase." "Truth unseasoned. Underlined." He grunted softly. "Savarin wrote that truth, without grace or preparation, is indigestible to most. A useful aphorism. Did you see the mayor's study?" "Closed. Locked. Return tomorrow morning. I'll require the contents of his wife's correspondence drawer, if such exists. You will also pay a visit to Mr. Savarin, if the name is more than literary. Begin with Felix at Rustermann's. He will know the name's local flavor." "Wolfe," I said, "the mayor's people already have watchers out front. If I start knocking on restaurateurs with the same surname, someone's going to connect dots that aren't ours." "Then let them," he said. "Confusion is a shield, not a risk. I expect you by 5 with facts. If the mayor's wife fled voluntarily, she did so into a design. If she was taken, the design was hers first." He hung up, which is Wolfe for conversation concluded. The air outside had that late autumn sharpness that makes the city sound brittle. I stood there for a moment, piecing the puzzle edges. A frightened woman, a burned letter, an underlined phrase, and a man named Savarin floating somewhere between cookbook and conspiracy. It wasn't much, but Wolfe didn't need much. Just a thread. And this one had the faintest scent of saffron and smoke. When I hailed another cab, I wasn't heading home yet. The literacy center had given me an address in the volunteer registry, Mrs. Murrow's emergency contact, written in her own neat hand. It wasn't her husband's name. It was Paul Savarin, and whoever he was, he'd just turned from footnote to chapter heading. The cabbie took me down to the village, where the address from the volunteer registry led, a narrow street that still smelled faintly of ink and bad philosophy. Number 14 was an old brick walk-up with a cracked green door and the kind of buzzer system that predated good manners. I pressed the one marked Savarin, P, and waited. Nothing. I pressed again, longer. Finally, a voice drifted through the tin speaker, low and textured like smoke and sandpaper. "Who's asking?" "Goodwin," I said. "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." A pause. Then, "That name still means something." That wasn't the kind of reply you get from strangers. Before I could ask what it meant, the buzzer sounded. I climbed the stairs, 3 flights of them, each one creaking with the kind of complaint that said the building had seen too much and been paid too little. The door opened before I knocked. The man behind it could have been 50 or 60, depending on how much he liked his life. He had silver in his hair and in his eyes, too, the kind that doesn't shine but warns. "Come in," he said. "If Wolfe sent you, you'd better tell me what he wants." The room looked like a scholar, and a chef had declared a truce. Bookshelves lined one wall, full of culinary texts in French and Italian, while the kitchen side gleamed with old copper pans and a cutting board that had seen more history than some nations. A kettle hissed on the stove. "I didn't say Wolfe sent me," I said, stepping inside. "But he's aware of you." "That makes two of us aware," he said, pouring hot water into a teapot. "What's this about Eleanor?" There it was. The first name, clean and unprompted. I kept my face neutral. "You've heard she's missing?" He nodded once. "I heard this morning. From the papers?" "No. From her?" "No. From someone who thought I should know. Wolfe, I assume." "Close. The mayor. He's keeping it quiet." "You two know each other?" He sat at the small table, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I knew her before Albert did. We were young." He let the word linger, as if age had put it on probation. "She married him and I didn't. That's the short version." "Any reason she'd come to you now?" He poured the tea. "There's always a reason, Goodwin. The question is whether it's mine to tell." He took a sip and studied me. "You've got Wolfe's patience, but not his diet. He's fishing through you." "Let's say he's collecting ingredients," I said, "and you might be the spice that keeps this dish from burning." That earned me the faintest smile. "Still using metaphors for food. Good. Wolfe trained you well." "Trained isn't the word," I said. "Endured might be closer." He looked toward the window. The afternoon was fading, but the city's hum carried through the glass. "Eleanor was here 2 nights ago. Not long, 20 minutes maybe. She was nervous, which isn't like her. She said she'd made a mistake. Something about helping someone who didn't deserve it. She asked me if I still had the letters." "What letters?" He didn't answer right away. "They were written by Albert before he was mayor, when he was running for council. He'd promised her. Things, support, protection, maybe affection he never delivered. Nothing scandalous in itself, but politicians have a talent for embarrassment. I kept them out of sentiment, not malice." "And she wanted them back?" "She wanted them gone," he said quietly. "Burned. I told her I'd already done it years ago. She didn't believe me. She said if anyone found them, it could ruin him and her. She left in a hurry. I haven't seen her since." "Who else knew about those letters?" "Only me and Eleanor. Maybe someone guessed. The kind of guess that comes from access, not intuition." "Meaning someone in City Hall?" He shrugged. "Politics is a sieve. You can't keep secrets, only delay their escape." I took out my notebook. "If you're telling the truth, and for now I'm charitable, then someone could have used those letters to lure her out." Savarin didn't flinch. "I thought that too, but I don't know who would risk it. She's too visible." "Visibility's a double-edged blade," I said. "Makes you safe until it doesn't." He stared into his tea. "Tell Wolfe she was frightened. Not of losing her marriage. Of losing herself. That's worse." When I left, the streetlights had flickered on, and the village was full of that half-light that makes everything look like a secret. I didn't get 3 steps from the stoop before I heard the tail again. The soft cough of a car starting behind me. The same sedan. Different driver. They'd swapped faces, but not plates. I let them follow me half a block before ducking into a bookstore, crossed through to the back alley, took a cab from the next corner. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the lights in the office were low and Wolfe was in his chair, looking as if he hadn't moved since the Magna Carta. The smell of saffron and veal drifted in from the kitchen. "You've seen him," Wolfe said, not asking. "Yes," I said. "Paul Savarin, old flame, long memory, clean conscience. Mrs. Murrow visited him 2 nights ago, asked about some letters her husband wrote back before politics wore a tie. She thought they still existed. He claims he burned them." Wolfe grunted. "He lies. Sentimentality forbids such incineration." He may have hidden them or transferred them. That's what I thought, I said. He's calm for a man with a loaded matchbox. Wolfe's eyes half closed. And she, in fear, sought to erase the past. Someone persuaded her otherwise. By deceit, most likely using the letters as bait. The arithmetic is simple. Simple? I said. Then maybe you can do me the courtesy of sharing the answer. The letters exist. The mayor does not know. Whoever obtained them or a copy used them to summon Mrs. Murrow under pretext, perhaps promising their return. She went discreetly and did not return. He leaned forward slightly, which in Wolfe's world counts as a sprint. We must find those letters. They are the fulcrum of this case. Sure, I said. But where do we start? Saverin's place? The mayor's office? The literacy center? He picked up his beer and examined the bubbles as though they were suspects. None. You will begin with Mr. Bligh. He knows more than he should, and he will not lie well. Bring him here by any means short of assault. Understood, I said, heading for the door. And Archie, Wolfe added, if the watchers remain outside, wave to them. Let them think we're ignorant. It flatters their delusion. I grinned. Nothing like giving the competition a sense of security. He closed his eyes. Indeed, security in fools is always fatal. By the next morning, the city had a chill that made even the pigeons look undecided about staying. I'd managed 5 hours of sleep, a cold shower, and one of Fritz's omelets that could make a man reconsider bachelorhood. Wolfe was already in the plant rooms, conducting his morning confessional with the orchids. When he's in there, the only thing that can pry him out is an act of Congress, or the word beer. So I took advantage of the calm before the next storm and called the mayor's office to reach Harold Bligh. He was in conference, which in government speak means he's thinking up a reason not to talk to you. I left a message with enough implication to keep him awake. Something about Mrs. Murrow's last known contact. It worked faster than caffeine. He called back within 15 minutes, his voice wearing the kind of restraint that costs money. Mr. Goodwin, the mayor's schedule is rather full. If you have information, you'll pass it to me, and I'll determine the relevance. Sure, I said. I was hoping to return the favor. Mr. Wolfe would like a word in person. He's got a few questions that might save the mayor from a worse kind of publicity. I told you, his time is limited. Then you're in luck, I said. So is Wolfe's. We can be done in 10 minutes, assuming you've got nothing to hide. That earned me a pause. Then, I'll come by at noon. When I hung up, Wolfe was already back at his desk, sleeves unbuttoned, appetite sharpened by thought. He didn't ask if I'd eaten. He asked if I'd baited the hook. He'll be here, I said. Noon. Probably brings his own air of importance. Excellent, Wolfe said. You will prepare coffee, not tea. Men like Mr. Bligh prefer to feel vigilant. Meaning he's nervous? Meaning he's guilty. At 12 sharp, the bell rang. I opened the door to find Bligh wrapped in tension and a raincoat. He looked like a man who'd spent the morning debating with mirrors. His eyes flicked over the room as if he expected a stenographer and a subpoena. Mr. Wolfe, he said tightly as I ushered him in. I'm here as a courtesy to the mayor. Wolfe inclined his head. You are here because you are involved, Mr. Bligh. The distinction is subtle, but not academic. That stopped him for a second. I don't know what you mean. You do, Wolfe said, but you will insist on ignorance until it's inconvenient. Please sit. Mr. Goodwin, the coffee. I poured. Bligh's hands stayed clasped in front of him, the way a man holds a steering wheel during a crash. Wolfe said, Your employer has informed me that his wife left their home without explanation. You have repeated this narrative to others. It is false. Bligh's mouth tightened. If you're suggesting, I am stating, Wolfe cut in. You knew of her plan to leave before she did so. You facilitated it, directly or indirectly. I'm curious as to whether you did so at the behest of the mayor or in your own interest." The color drained from Bly's face. "That's absurd." "Then refute it." He hesitated, and that was enough for Wolfe. He pressed on, softly, the way a boa might inquire about dinner. "Mrs. Morrow received a letter 3 nights before her disappearance. She burned it. You knew of this because you had her mail routed through your office for security review. Your fingerprints are on a copy which you had made before delivery. That is not conjecture, it is deduction. The contents of that letter referred to a certain Mr. Saverin, whose name you now recognize. Correct?" Bly's eyes flicked to me, gauging how much we knew. He swallowed. "You have no proof of that." "I do not need proof," Wolfe said. "I require coherence. The proof will arrive when you attempt to suppress it." Bly tried to recover composure, but it was like watching a man reassemble a deck of cards in the wind. "Mr. Wolfe, this is delicate. The mayor's wife, she's unwell. There were personal matters. She may have left for her own good. I'm trying to contain—" Wolfe's voice sharpened. "Contain what? Scandal, or your own blunder? You intercepted private correspondence, used it to manipulate a woman in distress, and now she is missing. Your containment is cowardice disguised as loyalty." The room went still. Bly stood abruptly. "This conversation is over." "Sit down," Wolfe said quietly, but with such precision that it stopped him mid-step. "You will listen to me now. You're not clever, Mr. Bly, but you are cautious. You would not risk acting alone. Who instructed you to monitor her letters?" "I can't answer that," Bly said hoarsely. "You won't," Wolfe corrected. "Then I shall tell you. It was the mayor's chief strategist, Ms. Laird. Am I correct?" Bly's silence was answer enough. Wolfe nodded slightly. "You will now telephone her. Tell her Mr. Goodwin will call this afternoon for an interview, by the mayor's approval. Say nothing else. If you deviate, you will find the mayor's goodwill more elusive than Mrs. Morrow herself." Bly looked at me, realized resistance would be counterproductive, and made the call. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. When he hung up, Wolfe dismissed him with a curt nod. As the front door closed behind him, I said, "You played him like a bassoon." "I dislike the instrument," Wolfe said, "but it produces satisfactory noise when pressed. So now we've got another player, Miss Laird. You think she's the one who sent that letter?" "Not think. Suspect. The woman orchestrates perception for a living. Such people regard deception as craftsmanship. She may have arranged the letter to test Mrs. Morrow's reaction or to engineer it." I whistled softly. "If she did, she might have done it for political damage control. Keep the mayor's wife from doing something inconvenient." "Precisely. Or," Wolfe said, "for something more intimate. Affection and ambition are often indistinguishable in that circle." The doorbell rang again. Fritz was upstairs, so I went to answer it. Standing there was Saul Panzer, wearing his usual look of modest boredom and a raincoat that had seen more action than most detectives' careers. "Morning, Archie," he said. "Wolfe called?" "Yeah, about 5 minutes before Bly got here." He stepped inside. "Then it's serious." Wolfe greeted him with a rare nod of genuine satisfaction. "Saul, I need you to confirm a hypothesis. Mrs. Morrow's last movements from her home to wherever she went, the route, the vehicle, and who followed her. You will begin with traffic cameras and witnesses, but above all, discretion." "Understood," Saul said. "Who do I report to?" "To me," Wolfe said. "Directly. And quickly." When Saul left, Wolfe turned back to me. "Archie, Ms. Laird is expecting you at 3. I advise tact. She will recognize charm as artifice, so offer her candor, selectively." I grinned. "You're saying she's my type?" He scowled. "I'm saying she is dangerous. Treat her accordingly, and bring back something solid, even if it's only a lie polished enough to see our reflection in." As I left the brownstone, the sedan was gone, replaced by a darker one. The watchers had upgraded. Whatever Wolfe had stirred, the ripples were widening, and somewhere at the center, Mrs. Murrow was still missing, and the truth was starting to smell like it had been left too long on the stove. Miss Laird's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building that looked like it had been designed to impress journalists and terrify accountants. The lobby had more security than a bank vault, but charm and Nero Wolfe's name still opened doors faster than credentials. When I gave the receptionist my card, she stiffened like I'd handed her a subpoena. 10 minutes later, I was escorted into an office large enough to hold a small orchestra and cold enough to refrigerate a conscience. Miranda Laird stood by the window, framed by the skyline and a cloud of cigarette smoke that probably violated 6 city ordinances. She was in her 40s, precise in every gesture, the kind of woman who made a conversation feel like a fencing match where she'd already measured your reach. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, turning, "you're the one who works for the genius who never leaves his chair." "That's me," I said. "And you're the genius who makes politicians sound honest." Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Flattery is a currency that's devalued here. What do you want?" "To talk about Eleanor Murrow," I said. "You were the one who asked Bly to monitor her mail." She took a slow drag on her cigarette, exhaled toward the skyline. "Mr. Wolfe is as subtle as advertised. You've come to accuse me?" "I've come to ask why." "Because that's my job," she said. Mrs. Murrow had developed a fascination with social causes. She was meeting people the mayor couldn't afford to be associated with. We screened her mail to keep political opponents from exploiting her naivete. "That's a lovely justification," I said, "but it doesn't explain why she vanished after receiving one of those letters." "People leave," she said flatly, "especially people married to ambition." I watched her, and she watched me, both waiting to see who'd blink. "Mrs. Murrow met with a man named Paul Saverin 2 nights before she disappeared," I said. "Old acquaintance." "You knew that, didn't you?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in the marble. "If she did, it was unwise. Saverin is inconvenient history. Funny thing, he says she came to ask about letters. Love letters. From before the mayor had an office or an image to protect." Laird didn't move. The silence hung between us like static before a storm. "If such letters ever existed," she said finally, "they're gone. And if Saverin told you otherwise, he's playing with matches in a powder room." "Maybe," I said, "but someone used those letters, or the idea of them, to bait her. She thought she was meeting a friend. Instead, she disappeared." Laird stubbed out the cigarette. "You're suggesting I engineered that?" "I'm suggesting you might know who did," I said. "You had access, motive, and the skill to make it look like someone else's mistake." Her lips curved slightly, but it wasn't amusement. "Do you really think I'd risk my career for a jealous stunt? The mayor's re-election is 6 months away. The last thing I need is a scandal that smells of sentiment." "Maybe it wasn't about sentiment," I said. "Maybe it was insurance. If the mayor's wife was unpredictable, removing her from the chessboard would make the game cleaner." She stepped closer, close enough for me to see the faint tremor at the corner of her mouth. "Listen carefully, Mr. Goodwin. Eleanor Murrow wasn't removed. She left on her own. She called me the morning before she vanished, said she was taking a few days to think. I told her to be discreet. That's all." "Did she say where?" "No," she said. "And I didn't ask. I assumed she was with someone she trusted." "Saverin?" "Maybe," she said too quickly. Then softer, "But if she trusted him, she was a fool." I let the pause stretch, then said, "You don't like him." "I don't like people who remember things better left forgotten." That was as close to confession as she'd ever come. I thanked her for the time, and she let me out with a smile that was pure politics. Smooth, meaningless, and cold. Outside, I found Saul Panzer leaning on a lamp post across the street, reading a paper like a man allergic to coincidence. I crossed to him. "You've been busy," I said. He folded the paper. "Depends on what you call busy. I've got Mrs. Murrow's trail up to a point. She took a car service Tuesday night around 11:45. The driver dropped her at 67th and York. Cash fare, no name. After that, nothing." "York Avenue," I said. "Close to the river, close to a dozen places she could disappear into." "Or be made to," Saul said mildly. "But here's the thing. Traffic camera caught her crossing the street alone. No one followed. 10 minutes later, the same camera picked up a second car. Government plates, registered to City Hall. Bly's office? Maybe. Could be anyone in the mayor's circle. I'll trace it." I nodded. "Do that. And find out whether Ms. Laird made any late-night trips that night." Saul gave a slight grin. "You like her for it?" "I like her for something," I said. "Wolfe thinks she's clever. That makes her dangerous." He tipped his hat and melted into the city like fog with an expense account. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in mid-afternoon repose with a book open and an expression that meant he was already 10 steps ahead. Fritz had left the faint aroma of saffron and lamb in the air, a sure sign of optimism. "She spoke," Wolfe said, without looking up. "She spoke," I said. "Carefully. Claims Mrs. Murrow called her before vanishing, said she needed a few days. She denies sending the letter. Also says Saverin's the fool in the equation." Wolfe grunted. "She fears him, then. That's good." "Good," I said. "I'd call it complicated." "Complication," Wolfe said, "is the evidence of design. When a pattern becomes intricate, the hand behind it trembles." He leaned back, closing the book. "We are nearing the point of rupture. Within 24 hours, the liar will make a move to preserve their lie. Saul will provide the catalyst." "Meaning what?" "Someone's about to panic." He smiled faintly. "Exactly. And panic, Archie, is the one human luxury that leaves fingerprints." I was about to press him for more when the phone rang. I picked it up. A voice, female, low and strained, said, "Tell Mr. Wolfe I can't go back. It's too late." "Who is this?" I asked, but the line went dead. When I turned, Wolfe was watching me, still as a statue. "Well?" I set the receiver down. "That was Eleanor Murrow." Wolfe exhaled once, slowly. "Then the game, my dear Archie, has finally come home." The sound of her voice stayed in the room like perfume after the door shuts. Wolfe didn't move for a full 10 seconds, which in his world is an eternity of calculation. I kept my hand on the receiver as if it might speak again, but the line was dead, that flat hum that sounds like finality. "You're sure it was her?" he asked. "As sure as I am that Fritz will serve beer before 5, I said. Low voice, nervous, deliberate. "And she said she can't go back." "Not won't. That's the kind of phrasing you use when someone else holds the ticket." He nodded once, eyes half closed. "A coerced fugitive. That complicates the geometry. We must now determine who benefits from her absence, who must keep her away." I started to reply, but the phone rang again, sharp this time, and I jumped like a rookie. Wolfe didn't even glance at it, so I picked up. It was Saul. "Archie? Got something. The government car I mentioned, registered to a department under City Hall's logistics division. Guess who signed the requisition?" Surprised me. "Miranda Laird," he said. "Timestamp matches the night Eleanor Murrow vanished. The vehicle was logged out at 11:30 p.m. and back in the garage by 2. No driver listed." "That's neat," I said. "Very tidy." "Too tidy. I checked traffic footage. That car stopped twice, once on York Avenue near the spot Mrs. Murrow was last seen, and again by a warehouse at the riverfront. After that, no sign. I'm headed there now." "Wait for me," I said, but Saul had already hung up. Wolfe's eyes were open again. He should not have gone alone. Saul's allergic to waiting, I said. And he's been allergic longer than you've been sitting in that chair, which is saying something. He sighed, then said, "Very well. You will follow. But take care. If this has moved from deceit to confinement, we are dealing with desperation. And desperate people, while rarely intelligent, can be fatal." I grabbed my coat and gun, the latter for tradition's sake. The street outside was wet, slick from a drizzle that hadn't made up its mind to rain. The darker sedan was still parked opposite the brownstone. I gave them a cheerful salute as I passed, then took a cab toward the East River. Saul was waiting near the warehouse district, hands in his pockets, posture casual, but eyes busy. "You didn't need to rush," he said when I joined him. "I didn't go inside." "Restraint," I said. "That's new. I'm saving the energy for your benefit," he said. "Take a look." The warehouse sat squat against the river, one of those half-abandoned places the city keeps forgetting to tear down. The only light came from a narrow window high up, glowing faintly yellow. Beside the loading bay was the same car Saul had described, paint glistening under the lamplight. "You sure it's the one?" "Plates match, and the engine's warm. Someone's home." We approached quietly, keeping close to the wall. From inside came the faint hum of conversation, 2 voices, both female. I caught only fragments through the cracked window. "Not what we agreed. You'll do as you're told, Eleanor." That name hit like a bell. I motioned to Saul and we moved to the side door. It was locked, but a firm nudge from Saul's practiced hand turned the latch. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of salt and dust. The voices were closer now, one calm, the other trembling. "I'm leaving," Eleanor Morrow said. "You can't stop me." "Don't be absurd," Laird replied. "If you walk out, you'll destroy everything your husband built. The letters are already copied. One word from me and every paper in the city will have them by morning." Saul looked at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded and stepped forward. "Evening, ladies," I said. They turned fast. Mrs. Morrow looked pale, hollow-eyed but intact. Laird's expression flickered only for a moment before hardening. "Mr. Goodwin," she said coolly. "How predictable." "Thanks," I said. "I aim for consistency." Eleanor moved toward me, but Laird caught her arm. Saul was quicker. He stepped in, his hand closing around Laird's wrist with enough persuasion to loosen her grip. "This is unnecessary," she said. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand plenty," I said. "You staged her disappearance. The letter, the car, the fear. It's all your production. What you didn't count on was her conscience growing a backbone." Eleanor's voice trembled. She said the letters could ruin Albert, that they'd prove he used city money during his first campaign. She told me if I disappeared for a few days, she could make them vanish. I was foolish enough to believe her. Laird's composure cracked just enough to show the anger underneath. "You think this was about money? It was about survival. If those letters surface, he's finished, and so am I. The mayor needed protection, and he lacked the stomach to act." "So you did it for him?" I said. "He'll be thrilled." Her jaw set. "I did it for all of us. She would have confessed everything to the press. I just needed time to manage it." "Kidnapping is a poor management strategy," Saul said dryly. Laird's eyes darted to the door. "You have no proof of force?" "Maybe not," I said, "but Wolfe will." At the mention of his name, something in her eyes shifted. Fear, pure and unfiltered. "You told him?" "Oh, he knows," I said. "And he's been expecting your call." For a second she seemed ready to argue. Then the fight went out of her. She stepped back, breathing hard. "Take her then," she said. "But if those letters see daylight, you'll have blood on your hands too." We got Eleanor out, hailing a cab a block away while Saul called Wolfe. I stayed beside her as the car rolled through the wet streets. She stared out the window, voice low. "I didn't mean for it to go so far. I just wanted the truth gone. Truth, I said, has a habit of sticking around, especially when Wolfe's involved. At the brownstone, Fritz was waiting with a blanket and the kind of efficiency that could shame a hospital. Wolfe was in his chair, eyes half-lidded, the faintest flicker of satisfaction breaking through. "Mrs. Morrow," he said, "welcome home." She looked at him as though she'd stumbled into judgment itself. "It's over, then?" "Not yet," Wolfe said softly. "First, we must decide whose ruin will serve justice best." Her hand trembled slightly on the armrest, and I could see she didn't know if she'd just been saved or sentenced. Wolfe reached for his beer. "Archie," he said, "arrange for the mayor to join us. Tonight. He should attend the denouement of his own salvation." And for the first time in days, I saw the faint spark in his eyes that meant the trap was set, and the last move would be his. The mayor arrived just before 9, his overcoat clinging to him like guilt. The drizzle had thickened to a wet mist, and by the time I opened the door, he looked like a man who'd been walking through his own scandal. Behind him, the same sedan idled by the curb, the driver pretending the streetlights were worth studying. I led Morrow inside, past the comforting smell of Fritz's roast duck, and through the office door where Wolfe waited, chair turned slightly toward the fire. Mrs. Morrow sat near the desk, a blanket over her shoulders, eyes fixed on nothing. "Albert," she said softly. He froze at the sound of her voice. Whatever veneer of political polish he had cracked right there. "Eleanor," he breathed, stepping forward. "Thank God, you're safe. How?" "Sit down, Mr. Morrow," Wolfe said. "Gratitude can wait until comprehension catches up." Morrow obeyed, still watching his wife as though she might vanish again if he blinked. Wolfe's voice came out low, even and final, the tone that could sandpaper a man's soul without raising volume. "Your wife has endured a most inconvenient devotion to truth. She believed you in danger, not from your enemies, but from your friends. She was not wrong." Morrow turned to me, trying for firmness. "Mr. Wolfe, I appreciate your efforts, but I don't follow. Where has she been?" "In captivity," Wolfe said, "though one of persuasion, not violence. She was sequestered by your chief of staff and strategist under the noble pretext of protecting your career." The mayor's eyes widened. "Miranda Laird, that's impossible." Eleanor's voice was brittle. "It's not. She told me the letters could ruin you, that she'd handle them if I stayed quiet, stayed hidden. I believed her." Morrow sank back in the chair, pale now. "Letters? What letters?" "Yours," Wolfe said. "Written to your wife before your campaign, discussing certain allocations of funds. Unwise correspondence, but not catastrophic, until someone decided to weaponize it. Those letters were copied. Mrs. Laird used the copies to extort silence, and in doing so, nearly created the very scandal she claimed to prevent." Morrow's hand trembled. "You're sure?" "Certain," Wolfe said. "We retrieved both women and evidence. Miss Laird's duplicity was thorough but inelegant. Mr. Panzer confirmed the city vehicle she used, and her statements tonight will, I expect, complete the picture. She believed her interference indispensable, that she could control appearances while concealing her own manipulation. The old delusion of political architects, that image outweighs substance." Eleanor's voice was quiet but steady. "She said the press would destroy you. She said I couldn't be trusted to keep quiet." Wolfe's lip curled faintly. "A common falsehood, Mrs. Morrow. It is never the truth that ruins men. It is the attempt to hide it. Your error was faith in those who confused discretion with deceit." Morrow rubbed his temples, defeated. "If what you say is true, I'll end her career." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "You will end your own if you make that public." She acted from loyalty, misguided though it was. The wiser course is transparency tempered by control. You will announce that your wife, exhausted by the campaign strain, took a brief retreat for health. You will confirm your faith in your staff, and quietly you will dismiss Miss Laird on grounds of fatigue, not treachery. Murrow stared at him. You're asking me to lie again. I am advising you to manage truth, Wolfe said sharply. A man in your position cannot afford martyrdom to purity. You will restore your wife's reputation first, and your conscience later. Eleanor looked at him with something between admiration and resentment. You're suggesting we pretend this never happened. I am suggesting, Wolfe said, that you both learn from it. If the mayor had trusted you and you had trusted yourself, no one else could have intervened. Political deceit is rarely public. It begins in the home, with silence and half-truth. For a long moment the room held its breath. Then Murrow reached for his wife's hand. Eleanor, he said, whatever happens, I'm sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have stopped it. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. You can still start, Albert, by telling me the truth for once. He nodded, and for the first time that evening the silence between them felt less like distance and more like the beginning of understanding. Wolfe leaned back. You may go when you wish, he said. Fritz has prepared a meal in the dining room. I advise you both to eat. You'll need strength for the charade ahead. Murrow stood, uncertain. Mr. Wolfe, what do I owe you? Nothing yet, Wolfe said. You may settle your debt by refraining from making a fool of yourself in tomorrow's press conference. That will suffice. They left together, quiet as shadows. The office door closed behind them, and for a moment the brownstone returned to its proper temperature. I poured Wolfe his beer. You handled him like a violin, I said. A little sympathy, a little scolding, and presto, the mayor's both grateful and terrified. He grunted. Men of office respond to tone, not truth. It is the only language they comprehend. Still, I said, I have to hand it to you. You saved a marriage, a career, and possibly the city's patience. I saved order, he said simply. That is the only constant worth preserving. The fire cracked once, sharp as punctuation. Wolfe sipped his beer, eyes half closed. Miss Laird will confess by morning. Panzer will ensure the police file reflects an error in communication, not conspiracy. And Mrs. Murrow will, I hope, resume her charitable pursuits with greater discernment. I nodded. So it's over. He looked at me, heavy-lidded but alert. Nothing is over, Archie. Politics, like human folly, does not conclude. It only changes costume. But for tonight, yes, it is finished. He reached for the bell to summon Fritz, signaling that the hour for philosophy had ended and the hour for roast duck had begun. The brownstone settled into its familiar rhythm again. The world outside could collapse, but inside these walls, order ruled, dinner was sacred, and Nero Wolfe had once again proven that the mind, properly used, needs no movement at all to win. As I turned off the office light, I caught one last look at him, massive, serene, and unmovable as ever, and thought how even the mayor of New York had just danced to the tune of a man who never left his chair. I locked the front door, listened to the faint clink of silverware from the dining room, and decided that in a world full of panic and politics, Wolfe's kind of immobility might just be the only real power left. It should have ended there. The mayor's car pulled away from the curb. Fritz cleared the dishes, and the brownstone exhaled in that post-crisis quiet that usually means the world has gone back to its orbit. Wolfe was halfway through a second beer, eyes half-lidded, when the phone rang again. It was nearly midnight, and there's a rule in this house. After 10, nothing good calls. I reached for it, expecting some reporter or city official who couldn't take no for an answer. The voice on the other end was neither. It was Saul. "Archie," he said, "you might tell Wolfe to hold that beer. I've got something ugly." I straightened. "If this is about Miss Laird—" "It is," he said. "They just pulled her out of the river." East side, near the same warehouse. Dead 30 minutes at most. That froze me for a second. Suicide? That's the convenient word, Saul said. But the way she landed, it looks more like someone gave her help. No witnesses yet. I thought you'd want to know before the mayor's name hits the wind. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe hadn't moved, but his eyes were open now, bright and narrow. Well? Laird's dead, I said. River job. Either she jumped or someone gave her a nudge. He set down his glass carefully, the kind of motion that tells you something in him had gone to full alert. So soon. Predictable, and most regrettable. That woman had the cunning of a tactician and the ethics of a crow. Someone feared what she might say. You mean Murrow? I asked. Or one of his merry aides? Possibly neither, he said. Her silence serves more masters than one. A corpse, you see, is the most loyal accomplice in politics. I whistled low. Saul's on the scene. He'll call with details. Wolfe nodded once. Then we wait. But do not deceive yourself, Archie. This alters everything. Until this moment, deception was our adversary. Now we contend with murder. It wasn't the first time a missing person had turned into a body under Wolfe's watch, but it was the first time he looked almost weary admitting it. He leaned back, hands steepled. Fetch the police. Mr. Kramer must be apprised. I made the call. Kramer came in an hour later, looking as if he'd been dragged from bed and shoved into a uniform of irritation. His face was red, his jaw set, and he didn't bother to hide the cigar that wasn't lit. Don't tell me you've started a homicide before breakfast, he said. Who's dead? Miranda Laird, I said. He stopped mid-step. The mayor's woman? Holy. He bit it back, turned to Wolfe. You're in this up to your orchids again, aren't you? Wolfe didn't blink. Tangentially, he said. The woman was last seen alive in the company of Mrs. Murrow, whose reappearance I facilitated. I trust you'll treat that as civic contribution, not obstruction. Kramer dropped into the red chair. You facilitated, huh? You've got a gift for stepping into the middle of my headaches. Let's hear it, and don't leave out the embroidery. I gave him the story. Laird's manipulation, Eleanor's hiding, the mayor's ignorance, and the supposed closure. He listened without interruption, which for Kramer is like fasting. When I finished, he grunted. So you're saying the mayor's chief strategist kidnapped his wife for political hygiene, and now she's dead. You expect me to keep that quiet? I expect you to verify it, Wolfe said. But first, establish how she died. If she was killed, the murderer is not the mayor. He lacks the nerve, but someone, perhaps in his shadow, sought to protect him from the fallout. Kramer scowled. You've got someone in mind. I have a theory, Wolfe said, but proof requires patience, and you are rarely patient. Still, I'll indulge you. Who gains by her death? Not Murrow. Her silence incriminates him further. Not his wife. Her relief is moral, not material. The remaining possibility is Bly. Bly? Kramer barked. The chief of staff? You think he drowned her? I think he orchestrated everything, Wolfe said calmly. He intercepted the original letter, commissioned the copies, and gave them to Miss Laird. When she exceeded his intention by abducting Mrs. Murrow, he realized exposure was imminent. Tonight she ceased to be useful. Kramer leaned forward. That's a nice fairy tale. You got anything that points to him besides your smug intuition? Only reason, Wolfe said. But I expect Mr. Panzer will soon provide corroboration. The car Miss Laird used was signed out by Bly under her name. The false paperwork will bear his hand. Kramer muttered a word I won't repeat. If you're wrong, Wolfe, I'll have your fat neck in a sling. Pfui, Wolfe said. You've threatened that since 1946, yet here I remain, unslung. Kramer stomped out 10 minutes later, full of steam and suspicion. Wolfe didn't watch him go. He sat there, still, the firelight flickering across his face. Archie, he said finally. Call Saul again. I want the autopsy details before dawn, and tell him to locate Bly discreetly. If he is not already in custody, he will try to flee. I nodded, dialing. Saul picked up after one ring, his voice low and tense. You were right, he said. No water in the lungs. She was dead before she hit the river. Blow to the head. Whoever dumped her wanted it quick. That fits, I said. Wolfe thinks Bly's behind it. Then Wolfe's right again. Bly's house is dark, no sign of him, but his car's gone, and guess where it's registered? City Hall, I said. Exactly. I'm tailing it now. If he's running, he's doing it quietly. Keep on him, Saul, but stay breathing. When I hung up, Wolfe's eyes were on me. He's fleeing, I said. Saul's got him. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Not quite satisfaction, more inevitability. He will lead us to the conclusion, Archie. Men like Bly never run aimlessly. They run to the one person who can still absolve them. The mayor? Indeed, Wolfe said. He will seek forgiveness or sanctuary, and the mayor, being both sentimental and foolish, will grant it. Prepare for guests. I stared at him. You think he'll walk? Right in here. He closed his eyes. I think the circle is closing. When it does, Archie, see that the door is locked. Tonight, truth will arrive uninvited, and it seldom knocks twice. Outside, the rain thickened into a downpour. Inside, the air was still, heavy with waiting. Wolfe sat motionless, every nerve masked by composure. I could almost hear the city turning toward us, one slow, inevitable step at a time. The rain turned from steady to relentless, a thick, pounding rhythm that muffled the city into silence. The clock on the mantel said 2 a.m. when the doorbell rang. Fritz, who values his sleep like Wolfe values order, poked his head out of the kitchen just long enough to see me heading for the front door and wisely retreated. Wolfe hadn't moved, but he opened his eyes as I reached for the knob. On the stoop stood Harold Bly, soaked, trembling, eyes wild in that particular way men get when conscience and self-preservation are pulling from opposite directions. His coat was unbuttoned, his tie gone, and there was a cut on his temple that hadn't come from shaving. He looked like a man running out of both time and explanations. Goodwin, he gasped. I need to see Wolfe. He's awake, I said. You're right on schedule. He stumbled in, leaving a wet trail on the parquet. I guided him to the office, where Wolfe sat like a thundercloud, pretending to be a philosopher. Bly stopped short when he saw Mrs. Murrow's empty chair, the one she'd occupied hours earlier. It was like seeing a ghost's outline. You've made poor time, Wolfe said mildly. Saul Panzer has been ahead of you for an hour, the police for 30 minutes. Sit down, Mr. Bly. Your flight has ended. Bly sank into the chair opposite him, shoulders sagging. I didn't. This wasn't supposed to happen. No, Wolfe agreed. But when people build conspiracies, they rarely plan for gravity. Miss Laird fell into the river of her own making, but your hands guided the current. Bly swallowed. I didn't touch her. She was hysterical. She said she'd tell the mayor everything. I just tried to stop her from leaving. She fell, hit her head on the railing. It was an accident. Ah, Wolfe said, eyes half closed. The eternal refrain of the guilty. But your accident required you to forge car records, dispose of a body, and flee into the night. Quite a busy conscience. Bly leaned forward, desperate. You don't understand. She would have destroyed him, the mayor, all of us. I was trying to protect him, protect the city. She lost control. She lost control. Wolfe echoed softly. So you restored it. With force. He gestured to me. Archie, telephone Mr. Kramer. Inform him that Mr. Bly has concluded his journey here. The confession may be verbal, but his arrival constitutes acknowledgement. Bly lurched up. You can't. Wolfe, please. If this goes public, it'll ruin Moreau. Everything he's done, everything she tried to save him from, it'll all come apart. Wolfe's eyes sharpened, the full weight of his intellect focusing on one point. No, Mr. Bligh, you misunderstand entirely. What ruins a man is not what he has done, but what he allows others to do in his name. The mayor will survive. You will not. The words hit Bligh like a verdict. He sagged back into the chair and covered his face with his hands. The fight had gone out of him. When Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, dripping rainwater and profanity in equal measure, Bligh didn't resist. He went quietly, head bowed, as if Wolfe's words had already locked the cell door. Kramer lingered just long enough to give Wolfe one of his patented stares, half irritation, half respect. You could have called sooner. I could have, Wolfe said, but I prefer to let men choose their own endings. Kramer grunted, gave me a look that said as usual, and left with his prize. When the door closed, the house was silent again. The fire had burned low, and the rain outside softened into a whisper. I turned to Wolfe, who hadn't moved a finger since Bligh's confession. Well, I said, that's one way to clean up a city. One body, one ruined career, and one mayor who's going to owe you the kind of gratitude that never makes the papers. He opened his eyes, the faintest shadow of fatigue passing across them. Gratitude, Archie, is as fleeting as reputation. I require neither. Then what do you call this? Civic duty? He grunted. Order. It is the only form of justice that does not decay. The mayor will learn humility, his wife will learn caution, and the city will forget. That will suffice. I watched him for a moment, the great man sunk in his chair, the flicker of firelight catching the faint sheen of beer in his glass. You know, I said, for someone who hates politics, you just outplayed every politician in town. Phoy, he said almost gently. I merely observed what they refused to see. Every deception, political or personal, eventually devours its maker. Miss Laird believed herself indispensable. Mr. Bligh believed himself righteous. Neither believed in consequence. He reached for his bell. Fritz will bring the coffee now. I require the taste of something civilized. When Fritz appeared with the tray, the smell of roasted beans filled the room, cutting through the damp air. Wolfe poured slowly, deliberately, as if ritual could erase the ugliness that had passed through the brownstone. I leaned against the door frame, watching him. You ever get tired of being right? He looked up, the faintest glint of amusement in his eyes. When men stop being foolish, perhaps I shall try being wrong. Until then, no. The rain finally ceased, leaving the street outside gleaming like new ink. The city, as always, was ready to forget. Wolfe took his first sip of coffee, sighed once, and closed his eyes. The case, the chaos, the politics, all dissolved into the rhythm of his breathing. In another 10 minutes, he'd be upstairs tending to orchids, as if the whole affair had been nothing more than a brief interruption in the cultivation of perfection. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and let the quiet settle in for good. Wolfe's voice came through the darkness as I started up the stairs. Archie. Yeah? Tomorrow, remind me to dismiss the notion of order as permanent. Tonight has proven, again, that civilization survives by habit, not by virtue. I smiled. I'll put it in your calendar, boss. He didn't reply, which was his way of saying the world, for now, could continue turning. And as I climbed to my room, the last echo of rain against the window sounded like applause for the man who never moved, yet somehow, once again, set everything in motion.